come once again to discuss things.
Classic Sonic just to keep it in that Pikachu, oh, he's got big eyes and he looks cute factor, rather than the moment you try to do modern Sonic, who's trying to look cool, it just instantly makes him look creepy.
Yeah, like even the Sonic fan film with like all the Channel Awesome people in it, even that had like the sense to go, okay, we're just gonna make the design look more real by like giving him quills and shit, as opposed to trying to change like fundamentally the design. It's so weird. So fucking weird. Anyway. I'm recording now because I was going to say this on recording and then transition into the episode, so this is fun. You know what Haley calls you?
Huh?
Whenever I'm like, oh, I'm going to go record with Alfie, and she says, oh, you're fuckboy?
That's amazing.
So on that note, hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Super2, joining me today is...
A fuckboy for fun.
A fuckboy for fun. Change everything about your channel. I know you're just starting to get popular, but change that now for consistency's sake. Yeah. Anyway. Apparently the YouTube algorithm doesn't like it when you curse within the first minute of the episode, but it's okay because the intro lasts a minute, so we're good. Anyway, we're here for another character discussion. Alfie, who are we discussing today?
Today we are discussing Jonathan Kent, not Pa Kent, but Superman's little boy that was introduced in Convergence.
Indeed. And so you and I have very differing takes on Superman, I feel. Like, you are truly, through and through a Superman fan, whereas I am someone who likes Superman for a number of reasons, but I never quite get into him, you know?
Yeah, precisely. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and so, to me, when they introduced Jonathan Kent, I don't think I've ever been more excited and into the idea of a Superman story than the idea of making him a dad. Something about that feels so incredibly natural and just perfect for Superman, as well as Batman. The introduction of children into these men's lives as characters has done nothing but make them more interesting to me.
Yeah, I'm very much in that agreement, especially because they've spent so many times, even from their creation since the 30s and stuff, they were the father figures for a lot of kids in depression, or when a lot of these male figures would go to war, and if you read Batman and Superman comics as the parental figures, they've always had that role in nearly every adaptation they've ever been in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And of course, like, Bruce has been a father for quite a long time. He's always had Dick as an adopted son kind of thing. But something about the relationship to the Robins always felt just a little removed and not quite fatherly, much more kind of older brother or something. When you introduce Damian, it really did become a father-son dynamic, at least in my opinion. People are welcome to disagree with that. And so, about 10 years, give or take, later, we end up with Jonathan Kent introduced into the Superman lore. And I guess we have differing opinions on Jonathan Kent because you've read more of him than I have.
Yeah. I've read all of the Jargons and Tomasi stuff, which was where a lot of his post-rebirth Convergence, like figuring out what his deal was done.
Okay, now you said all of it, so did you read both volumes of Super Sons then?
I meant the Tomasi main Superman books, not the Super Son books. I should have clarified that.
Gotcha. Okay. And that's where I know John from, is the Super Sons book. John was a character that was like kind of just, I liked the idea of him, but I didn't pick up Tomasi's Superman when Rebirth started because, God, the Jurgens action just turned me off so instantly that I didn't even want to give Superman a try. But then, it was like about like a year into Rebirth, I want to say, that they started up Super Sons, and I'm a huge Damian Wayne fan, so of course I wanted to jump on that. And that instantly gave me such a joy with John to just see him around Damian. I thought they had such a fantastic dynamic that, like, it's kind of just been there between, like, the Robins and their super equivalents for a while. Like, of course, you got Tim and Connor. It goes back quite a ways, and there's other versions of that as well. Dick and Supergirl used to hang out a little bit more in the comics too, stuff like that.
Jason and Bizarro had a thing recently.
Yeah, I thought that was a clever enough idea. So like that's always been there, but just for my money, the Super Sons worked on just such a pivotal level, and it's because so much of them are reflections of very distinct parts of their fathers. And it's just really interesting to read those character traits playing off each other with the added mix of, but they're kids. So there's like some silliness and there's some ridiculousness and there's just some, kid shit. Like there's a fantastic issue where Damian is hanging out with John, and then the Teen Titans come to, pick Damian up, and John asks if he can come along, and Damian's like, it's called the Teen Titans. And it's like Damian is such like that dick friend in that moment, who ditches you to go hang out with their cooler friends who don't even really like him anyway. That was just such a great little like, that's kid shit right there. And I always really appreciated that. So to see John kind of grow around that and deal with that, and then to see their relationship develop, I really became a huge John Kent fan. And then we get to the Bendis arc, and I was just like, no, when he made him a teenager. And that's not because I don't think he could make it work, or I think John's been, particularly poorly written or anything. It's just that we have that. We have so much of teenager with Superman powers, And there was something really unique about, 10-year-old with Superman powers.
Yeah, it's definitely the elephant in the room whenever we're talking about John now, which I feel like could almost be its own separate discussion, but maybe we'll lean into that more as we go into the future of what we imagine John will end up in going for. But just as what's already been written with John, I'm in much the same camp as you, where I find he offers a very unique perspective into this world, as the son of Superman is something that's always been toyed around as an idea from creators. Like even Alan Moore did a thing at the end of Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, like seeding that. The idea of Superman and Lois having a child which would be the best of both worlds and heralding a new thing. There's always been this like end point, like far off mystical goal of the DCU. But now that we've finally got that, and it's pretty much how you'd always imagined it, where he's a fun kid who's still learning his ropes around things. He's not quite as stalwart as his father because he hasn't had to go through that trauma of I'm alone in the universe that Clark did, but that only serves to make him probably a healthier person than Superman is. So it's very much an interesting thing, where a lot of the things I get from John that make him interesting to me is a lot of that possibility with him rather than how he is at the moment. Because I feel like when he's interacting with Damian, and they're having those fun back and forth. So it's very much showing him being able to interact with other kids his age that understand the superheroic world, which his father never got to have. His mother never got to have that because she was like an army brat, so she was living on with no one else who understood what she wanted to do. And it makes him seem that he's a lot more accustomed to the weirdness of the DCU than a lot they were, and he gets to grow up in that and can maybe help people more in that sense because he can connect to it weird. He doesn't feel so much as an outsider of the world from a doomed planet. He is 100% of Earth. And I think that's a really interesting idea to have that as the heir to Superman, like Superman plus. This is Superman, but refined to the point where all his character flaws have almost been burned away. And while I feel that makes a good idea of a legacy for Clark, I also feel like it doesn't necessarily make him the most interesting character. Whereas I feel like Damian has a lot of baggage that maybe Bruce didn't even have. Like, he's even more damaged than Bruce was at his age. So I feel like Damian benefits in a character in that way, where I feel like there hasn't been enough done with John to really push him until recently. I don't know how you feel about that.
See, I don't know. Like, it's one of those things because I think a good example is Kyle Rayner, because I'm currently reading through a lot of the early days of Kyle Rayner stuff when he was first introduced in comics. And I think I'm seeing kind of a similar thing to what you're talking about, where they really haven't had time to let the character breathe and introduce a lot of his stuff yet and really develop things. So far, really, the only thing Kyle has going for him as a character trait is he's an artist, he kind of is a bit gullible, he's really, really easy to get kind of love struck with. He's smitten. I'll put it that way. He's smitten. And his girlfriend got killed and shoved in a refrigerator. That's like all of Kyle's traits for at least the first year of publishing of Kyle Rayner, right? And I think you could do, we're almost 4 years into DC Rebirth at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you can say some similar things about John. He's a sweet kid. He wants to be just like his dad, which is adorable. He also really wants to have friends, and he's probably willing to be maybe just a little too accommodating in order to keep friends, which is a very Superman aspect to me. And he likes junk food. Like, that's... I like John Kent, and I'm struggling to define much else about the character that's like a really defining trait.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a really good friendship with Damian, even though Damian's a bit of a dick. Which, yeah, like those are the kind of the things, and I don't feel that that's a problem because a character. I really struggle to think of a character that's just fantastic out of the gate. Like, first issue on is perfect and is as in-depth as you need. And first year on is as in-depth as you want. Like, it's just... I don't think that exists in the same kind of format in widespread comics, because I love Damian Wayne, but that's because I had a lot of time to read him and watch him grow and go through a really definitive arc. And Damian was introduced in 2006, and his arc doesn't really complete until 2011 in the comics, in like official timeline, because his arc doesn't really complete until you get toward the end of Return of Bruce Wayne. And then it still doesn't truly complete until he dies in Batman Inc. And then we get the Damian that we have now once he's resurrected. Where he's had time to let stuff happen to him and to grow in that way. Whereas John, I mean, right now he's just there, and that's okay because we're getting a feel for him. We're introducing him in ways. And he's kind of just around, or at least he was until Bendis. And Bendis did a pretty massive change with him that really bothered me, which is insane because I think he wrote John twice. If I'm remembering correctly, he wrote John 2 times in his run, where like it's clearly a John scene. One of them was when he decided he wanted to go with Jor-El because let me rephrase that. He wrote John before aging him up twice. One of them was when he wanted to go with Jor-El, and he explained it was because there's an alternate future where he kills millions of people by accident, and he wants to know how to get control of himself so he doesn't do it. And then there was the scene where he's in the junkyard trashing cars because he's really upset about something. And both times, those are more Superman scenes. But I think John is written fantastically, and Superman is written as a father in really interesting, like, that is exactly how Superman would be as a father to me. Particularly the junkyard scene, because John was really upset that someone said something about their family. And there's this great line where John's trashing a car, like lifting it up and crunching it down. And he says, you know, we don't have to put up with that. We could. And Superman cuts in and says, we could what? And, like, you get exactly what the implication is there. We have all this power. We could do whatever we wanted. We could kill him. We could beat the shit out of him. We could what, John? What do you want to do to a person? And how does that make you feel? That you want to do something awful to someone. And, like, that's such a good scene. It's, like, that really perfect, very stern father figure moment for Superman, but it's also just an incredibly relatable scene that, you know, if you do that with a teenage Superman kind of character, then it comes off as whiny, but when it's a kid, it's a temper tantrum, and those are perfectly understandable for a kid, you know? It's that great learning moment.
No, I feel that's a very good idea, and something that basically you can only do when the character is at that age, and it's something we don't get a lot of with the character in general doing that. Basically, when you get the Superman character in that scenario, when he's that age, doing those kind of things, it's one of those. Sorry about that. I lost my train of thought. There's a different thing happening around me while I was doing that. Starting again. When I was going with that is basically I am 100% with you. It's a scenario we don't get to see a lot, because normally when we do Superman Origins and a character with that personality set, we always start very young or teens. We never do 10-year-old Superman, like rarely at all. There's that chunk of his life is skipped, and getting to see that, and not only that in the Smallville setting, but in the DCU setting, like how would a kid of Superman and Lois Lane react to living in that world with their weird circumstances, where even in Rebirth, we started off with back when, because John is such a weird coming into being story that I kind of want to touch on as well, just how really he's such a miracle we even got him at all. But like, they started off, they were refugees from the post-crisis continuity living in New 52, and he didn't know that his father was Superman. He just saw Superman on the TV, and he had a secret identity that whole time till he was 10. So he grew up idolizing Superman, and then he finds out Superman is his dad. Like, that's such a weird but interesting idea.
Such a weird idea.
Yeah, like that's like his backstory, but a part of me likes that in some ways, because it's kind of got like Barry Allen idea, where like he's idolizing the hero that he then gets to have as like a fan. He's not looking at it from, oh, he's my dad, that's why he's great. He's like, oh, I like my dad, Clark Kent, but Superman's so cool. I wish I could be like him someday. Oh my God, my dad's Superman. It's like a wish fulfillment thing. Like, if you're a kid reading a comics, it's such a Silver Age, pure, like, perfect idea for the world. I think it really does work. And I feel like that's something, getting to explore that more in depth was something I felt that the Tomasi run, because Juggins is like the wrong person you want to be going to write the young character book. Like, that's just, let's not even go there. But Tomasi is quite good at writing young characters. He's very good at writing Damian and John. But what I feel like he failed with in the main Superman run, and people disagree with me because a lot of people really like that run, is I felt he was too detached from Superman. I felt like he seed him. Something that always bothered me is he calls him Sir. And that really, I don't think Superman would ever have his child call him Sir. That seems like a really weird. It's a small thing, I know, but it's just that.
As a Midwesterner, that's not super uncommon.
I know, but it's just, I guess it's just me being out of that frame of reference, so it came off as weird to me. But
no, that's understandable. Like it does kind of throw me sometimes because like I'm a Midwesterner, but I'm still a city boy. And so it's like, but yeah, like I had friends growing up that were like, you know, their families out in the country. Haley's parents live kind of out in the country a bit. And that's a thing, in that particular circle. So that's, but I can see why it would seem off to someone kind of outside of that frame.
Yeah. But just as well, just the rest of that, there was kind of a detachment where John kind of comes across as more of a prop for Superman, or more so that he's being used to gain emotional reaction from Superman. And that's perfectly fine because it's the book Superman. It's not John's book. It's how does Superman deal as a father. So I can understand that to an extent. But I also feel like when you're introducing such a big part of the mythos, he kind of deserves more focus than he got. And I feel like with the Bendis thing, depending on where that goes, we might have lost that sweet spot, or we could get it back, or whatever. There's no telling with the future. But when Damian got in, because he's the biggest example I can go to of just major character gets a child out of nowhere and becomes a lasting thing. Like Spider-Man's had kids in different realities and stuff, but Batman got a son and it was permanent and it's not going anywhere anytime soon, like forever. Just Superman got that now. But when Damian was there, he was the focus. Like Damian, when he's on screen, when he's on the panel, he draws the attention, and everything's about Damian and the implications of Damian. What does Damian mean to Bruce? What does Damian mean to the Robins? What does Damian mean to the world? When John's around, he doesn't ever get that kind of focus. And I feel like part of how he got pushed into continuity is to blame for that, because what happened when we molded the continuities, when we got the post-crisis Superman and the New 52 Superman merge and the histories merged, when we got this big like splash page of this is the Superman timeline now, which was so fucking common it hurts, it was just, oh, and by the way, 10 years ago Superman and Lois had a child. There's 10 years of stories that we're just going to skip over because we have to pretend that they always happened, and now here he is. Damian, you can get away with that because you can just, the conceit is Bruce didn't know. Obviously, you can't have Superman have like a child he didn't know about. Like, that just isn't going to work. So it's just a weird thing that because we couldn't naturally build up to John, he kind of comes out of nowhere, but yet people act like he's always been there, so he doesn't get focus.
Yeah, I think I'd agree that his introduction is kind of sloppy and weird. But at the same time, I think that's so common among really well-loved comic characters that I can't be bothered to care that much. I think what John needs is just someone who gets it and comes in and does, you know, the take, right? Yeah. Like that's really all that's missing is like a bunch of people are there that like him and think he's cool, but they don't get the character yet. And it might be a couple of years till we get someone who gets the character and will do the take. Because I think Tomasi has a good voice for John. I don't know if he's like the definitive take on John, you know? I think Tomasi has a really good voice for John and a really good voice for Damian, so he can put them together. But I'm more interested in the person that's reading Super Sons now and is going to be writing comics in 5 to 10 years, like your Tom King with like Tom King in 2008 was reading Grant Morrison's Batman run and was reading Damian Wayne and stuff like that. And of course Tom hasn't written Damian Wayne very much, but he's in there, and he's got the take. He understands that character for as brief as the moments that we get him are, as opposed to, you know, your I like the guy's art and stuff, but like your Bernard Chang, who starts writing is Bernard Chang the writer on Teen Titans too, or is he just the artist?
I have no idea. I avoid that book like the plague.
Yeah, well, like, whoever the writer of Teen Titans is right now, he's like, oh yeah, I just knew Damian was a jerk, and that's like where I stopped reading his character. He ignored like 10 years worth of character development to write Damian Wayne as a jerk in Teen Titans. And to be fair, I haven't read the book. I don't know if that's 100% the case, but that's the consensus I've heard from people. And so I'm thinking John's just hasn't quite gotten that take yet that really establishes things. And that's, again, we keep dancing around it, so let's just really get into it. That's, again, my biggest problem with Bendis aging him up. Is it feels like it's way too soon to do that to a character. It's way too soon to age him up, and I've been reading the issues. I don't think the story justifies the departure as much as it really should. You know, like if you were to do that with any other character, you'd have to justify it, right?
Yeah, I think that is very much the consequence of no one having the take. This is Bendis doing his idea of the take, and Bendis is very comfortable writing teenage superheroes, and it's very obvious now that we know what he was going with all of this, that this has all been set up for Legion of Superheroes, that this was to get a Superboy that he could have on Legion of Superheroes to be that surrogate, because obviously you can get Superman to do it, and Connor's just too different in temperament from Clark. At the same time, I feel like because of that, and because the Legion is so much in their own space, I could legit see a time coming up soon where we just have both at the same time. That will have future John doing his thing with the Legion of Superheroes as like a far-off thing, and somehow, some way, we'll get Kid John back in the present, and they'll be like brothers or something like that. Like, I can legit feel like, I don't think Teen John's gonna go away, but I think Kid John's gonna come back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and like you and I have talked about this a bit off recording, where it's just everyone else is still writing John as a 10-year-old except for Bendis. Which is weird, because Bendis is, of course, the one on the Superman book and the one doing all the events at DC right now. He's pretty much his take on a character in the Superman lore is pretty much holy scripture at this point, and yet no one else at DC is touching Teenage John with a 10-foot pole. And that's strange. And so you just have to sit here and wonder, is it meant to stick? Or is there a plan to age him back down and do your classic comic thing where he keeps all his memories for whatever reason? Which I honestly, if he keeps all his memories but everyone just acts like he doesn't and they just never really acknowledge that era, fine, whatever. But I kind of hope he doesn't keep all his memories, because it's just, dude was fucking locked in a volcano for 10 years or like 7 years or some shit like that. That's crazy. Like, that was the thing that got me the most, is he shows up, he's a teenager, and it's like, okay, but he's been traveling through space for like 7 years of his time, and he's had all these experiences. I guess I can see that creating kind of an interesting and a different take than your typical teenage Superman. This is going to be a kid who's by necessity going to have a lot of experience with his powers. And then you get the thing, and it's like, oh no, he just sat in a volcano for 7 years, and then he just got back like 5 minutes ago. And it's like, what? That seems like that just... I cannot... If Bendis weren't Bendis, I don't think any editor would have let him run with that, you know?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel the time is excessive. I feel it didn't have to be that long. I think you could have got away with it just being a year, and it would bring him closer to Damian's age, but it would still have that like traumatic impact, and it would, because as much as I'm with you in saying, right, I'm here, it's much. At the same time, it also got me my favorite John moment, like so far as an entire publication history, of when he breaks out and it mirrors Action Comics #1 with how he holds the rock, and that's his moment where he proves himself as like, I'm more than just the boy in the Superman books. I'm more than just the Damian psychic. I am my own hero. I can get out of these horrible situations myself. This is me doing it in the same way my father like did all those years ago. This is my time. Like, that's so powerful. That's fucking genius writing. And I think you could have that and still keep Kid John and just be the start of the take, where this is where we start treating him as his own character rather than a sidekick to Superman or Damian. And I feel
totally.
But the problem is, it was just, you don't need that 7 years line. You could have a year, a month, a few weeks. It still keeps the same impact because he was there with Ultraman, who's this fucking psycho in the middle of the sun. That's still like with Volcano. That's like still horrifying shit for him to go through. That's still character building stuff that he went through.
Yeah, and like the bigger problem too is just from like a nitpicky fan perspective. 7 years in the volcano and he's still got superpowers? Really? How the fuck does that work, Takes him to the volcano because it drains his ability to absorb sunlight. Okay. I could see a year or a couple months in the volcano and he's got like that last ounce of power. But 7 years seems fucking ridiculous, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just from like that perspective, I again, it's just, if Bendis wasn't Bendis, no editor would have let him do that.
And I feel like it is one of those things where it was purely there to justify the end goal of Legion, and I'm always torn with that because at the same time I think it's a great idea that they're bringing that team back, and I think having John go out with them is a really good way to mirror his father. Like, that's what, it's like a coming of age thing for the Superman family almost. And I think that's a really smart idea to get him on that book, because it also means without Superman around or any of the other heroes around, he'll be able to get a focus again. He'll be able to get more character stuff. And I think that's obviously going to be what's happening down the line. I could see this Legion run, if it goes well, being like a place where a lot of John Kent fans have formed of this new take. But I'm also like, it really does feel like this is something that's happening to a character that we're pretending existed since 2006, rather than one that's only been around since Rebirth started.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I'm like, man, that'd be a cool move if I've had a bunch of years of 10-year-old Superman stories, but I haven't. We had a wealth of opportunity to tell really interesting stories with a kid Superboy, and it feels like it's sour grapes. No matter how much talent Bendis has, no matter how much talent anyone that writes this teenage John Kent has, I'm just going to sit here and be kind of disappointed that it's not the 10-year-old version, because I can't help but feel like anytime I'm reading a story with teenage John Kent at this point, I'm going to think, man, I wonder how 10-year-old John would be reacting to all this. That's going to be in the back of my head every time. And it's probably not fair, but,
I do think a lot of the moments would have a lot more impact if it was 10-year-old John still, because it's got that like, there's a really great line in one of the Bendis Superman issues where Superman has to like fight an armada, and he's like, time to show my son how to stop an alien war fleet without killing a single person, not a single one. And then it shows John smiling. And if that was 10-year-old John, like, I would have had tears in my eyes.
But he's a teenager, and he's gonna... He shows up with that fucking suit, and it looks like he's had that suit for years and shit. And then it's just like, you get the flashback, Grandpa Jor-El is just like, here, put this on, go home, bye. It's so sloppy. Oh man, it's kind of disappointed in that regard. And I try not to shit on Bendis too much. I try to be like, let the man tell his story, but again, you can just lose someone, And that's kind of how I felt about Bendis, is he just kind of lost me with some of these decisions. I just can't stand by that at all. What else can we talk about with John? I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Jorge Jimenez and his art for John Kent, because while we might not have the take from a story perspective, while we might only have strong voices or poor voices for John, I think Jorge Jimenez has the take for John's look down.
Oh, yeah.
He's got the best look for John, period.
Just as well, I've seen like his alternate designs for him as well, and some of them are really cute. Like there's one where he's got like the more classic Superman outfit, but like the trunks over his superhero pants are like shorts, and they're just red shorts with like a yellow belt, and like he's got like little red like boxing gloves. Like that's a really cool look I like. But also just his general features and stuff, that he is the John artist in the same way that Frank Quitely is a lot of people's Superman artist.
Yeah, I think he does. Like, one, he can actually draw children and have them look like children, which is a skill that seems to elude a number of comic book artists. But like, you know, he does such a good job of just having such a fun, exuberant energy that just jumps off the page. You know, you and I, even though I don't like Snyder's Justice League, that page of the 3 generations of Kent men doing the punch that's inspired by the
Father
Cell
said Kamehameha. Oh.
Yeah, like that is just there's such an exuberant energy that comes off of John's face when Jimenez draws him. It's really great. It's kind of a shame that Jimenez didn't come back to do the full run of Adventures of the Super Sons, since that might very well be the last time we ever get 10-year-old John Kent. Again, hopefully not, but it might be one of the last times we get that outside of fucking the Zoom imprint. Ugh.
That's another thing though. Again, like Snyder's Justice League, very much the front runner of these books. Like if you want to talk up someone on higher up on the totem pole than Bendis, it's Scott Snyder. Even he's still doing this seminal piece that will be seen forever in generations. Oh, that was such a good Superman moment. It's not Teen John.
Yep. And that's, again, it's one of those things that's making me wonder. And what's crazy about it is, you know, this is a podcast, it's going to be on YouTube for years. So here we go. If you're watching this after John was re-aged to be a 10-year-old again, I don't care if it was done, because at this point it's only going to feel like a fix. Like I care because I'm going to be glad, but at this point it's only going to feel like a fix of a bad decision. I don't really care if it was the plan all along. It's cheap then, you know? It's a bad decision, it's a cheap ploy, and it's just not something I feel is a strong introduction. You know, he did it in his first, 3 months on the book? That's a really... It's a good way to sour the taste in someone's mouth, you know?
I think that's... Like, Bendis was getting hate before he even jumped on the Superman books, and a lot of it I really disagree with, because a lot of people just have very different takes on Superman than I do, and Bendis leans more to where I see Superman as like this crusader for the people and more of a sci-fi crazy hero who doesn't have to always feel sad about the fact that he's Superman. But some people like sad Superman a lot of the time, and they responded negatively to Bendis. I'm generalizing a lot here, but I've seen so many hates, I don't really mind generalizing for some of these people. But they've said a lot of shit to Bendis, and while I feel most of it isn't founded, a lot of the John Kent fan base, I'm 100% like, no, you guys, you're not grouped in with that, because 100% you did get done dirty.
Yeah, and that's kind of just where I'm at with it. I'm like, I'm trying to go, and like I think his action run is still really good. But the Superboy stuff has just been making me like kind of crazy, because I just keep waiting for it to get to a point where I'm like, okay, now I understand why you had to do it, and it's been over 6 months at this point, and it just hasn't gotten there. And that's an investment in comic book time, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe if it were a trade and I could just read the Unity Saga all at once and then John Kent's back 2 arcs later or something, that'd be one thing. It's kind of funny because continuity-wise, it's worth talking about this before we wrap up. We are getting a bit long in the tooth here. So Adventures of the Super Sons has an editor note in issue number 1 that says this story takes place before the events of Man of Steel. And in Man of Steel, John decides that he's going to go spend his summer with Jor-El. And then in Adventures of the Super Sons number 1, Damian and John get kidnapped into space at the beginning of summer. And they deal with Rex Luthor the whole fucking story. All 12 issues of that series, they're dealing with Rex Luthor's bullshit and all the crazy antics that they get into is somehow or other connected to Rex Luthor, and it's a big old space adventure. And then they get back, and the last couple pages of the story is them going back to Wayne Manor, walking into Damian's room, and both of them falling asleep in twin beds. And just as they're about to sleep, the door opens and Alfred says, "Oh good, I knew you'd make it back before the first day of school." So explain that. Checkmate, atheists.
Facts and logic.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is though, since John's return since teenage John's return in Superman, not a lot of time has passed. We're still dealing with the fallout of the Leviathan strike stuff. And that happens minutes after John returns, if I'm to believe some of the timeliney craziness that Bendis is trying to convince me of about just how damn fast is Superman. But literally, not a summer has not passed in Bendis' Superman run yet. That's just you can't convince me of it because the time isn't there to make it make sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a weird kind of timeliney thing, and again, the fact that no one else is writing Teenage John really makes me wonder what DC is doing. Because man, they are risking alienating a lot of fans over one writer's wish, you know?
Especially because it was such a universally beloved decision. Mm-hmm. There's not a single person I can think of that doesn't like John Kent, at least as an idea.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Damian had a lot more backlash because the thing with Batman is he's always got that kind of bachelor fan base who like Batman just being the guy who sleeps with tons of women and has no kids and is the ultimate. He's a much more immature fantasy for people. I love Batman, but it just if you compare the two, Superman's got a day job and he doesn't drive a fast car or anything. He just works at an office and get yelled at by a boss. Batman's the fucking ultimate Chad. So you give him a kid, and a lot of that fan base who gravitates towards that are going to be I don't know. Even fucking Kevin Smith is just when they gave Batman a son, I was I don't know about that one. So that shows you how that reaction went, and a lot of people still have that against Damian. It was I don't think that you gave Batman a kid. Superman, however, is such the dad figure. It fits so naturally. It's something you'd expect. Oh, this has been here forever. What? This is a really recent addition, huh? So the fact that they're immediately trying to distance him from that world by first aging him up and then sending him off with the Legion really makes me think, especially because the first thing Bender said when he got the interview was he was really looking forward to writing the family dynamic.
That's ridiculous.
It's fucking such a troll.
Oh man. Yeah, I don't know. It's such a weird decision, and it makes it a really, really hard thing to justify. And I don't know, maybe I'm just holding on to too much hope, but it's kind of weird that no one else is running with it, and we're almost half a year away from it being introduced in the comics. Like, I know John doesn't have to show up in a lot of things, but it's like, okay, John's going to be aged up, but don't worry, John Kent fans, here's a year of him and Damian still hanging out. Okay, that's interesting. And also, at the end of that year of him and Damian hanging out, here's a continuity problem to chew into a little bit.
A line that we really didn't need to add unless it was something so specifically tied to...
I mean, it's a funny joke, but it's like, that's really interesting that you're going to put that in there. That's a ballsy-ass gag, I'll say that much, if nothing else. It's a ballsy gag that's going to disappoint a lot of people. Yeah. So, I don't know. It's interesting to talk about John Kent, though, and all the continuity hijinks that poor boy is involved in now. Do you have anything else you want to talk about with this before we wrap up? I know we're like extra long on this episode.
Well, the only thing I'm kind of curious on is I've always had interesting conversations with people about, like, we've seen what Batman's like in the future with Damian, and we've seen the Batman of Burnhaven, the fucking 666 Batman issues. I'm always curious of what an adult John in the Superman role proper would look like. Like, what would his job be as a secret identity? What would a lot of that be like? I'm always curious to me, and I'm wondering, did you have any, like, inclinations of, like, what would his job be as, like, an adult Superman or something like that?
See, I don't know. It's so weird. I just tend to think of the future of the DC universe. I'm not sure who has secret identities and who doesn't. And because superheroing has become so normalized by the time you get into just mid-era Superman career, it's hard to think that there's a need for a secret identity when you get to, like, you know, John's era, right? Mm-hmm. When the point at which John would be a superhero. And I don't know, I have kind of a different take. I like to imagine that there's a good future and a bad future where Damian becomes Batman. And so I do like to imagine them as, you know, Batman and Superman in their own right and not have it be a fucking hellscape. So that's kind of there for me. But, you know, take it how you will. I don't know. It's as far as, like, what would John be like as Superboy? It's kind of crazy because I think about DC 1 Million, where they talk about, you know, Superman's son took over as Superman, and after Lois died, the original Superman Prime just went off into space to go be immortal Superman across the universe. And I kind of just, I don't know, I think about that. It's like, yeah, he kind of just took over the family business of protecting the universe. Yeah, or protecting the Earth, you know?
That's how I always, like, imagined it is. Lois is aging, Clark's putting on makeup to look like he's aging with her. He kind of retires when John's, like, in his, like, old enough to take over the John's Superman Secondus, as they call him in 1 Million, which I really like. I love that. And he's got, like, the Kingdom Come logo, but it's just yellow and red. I really like that idea. That's really cute to me. So Superman, John takes that over, and, like, the fact that he does such a good job, or, like, he's doing all these things that Clark wouldn't do, because the world's a much better place now thanks to the original Superman, that he can be Superman without the same kind of fears that Clark had, so he's even better at the job, that he feels comfortable enough. You know what? My wife's dead now, son's got this handled. I kind of want to just kind of explore the universe that I've neglected for so long because I was so scared to leave Earth defended for any, like, length of time. That's really beautiful to me. It's just, like, it is very much the old farmer handing off the keys to the son, but in the grandest scale possible. So the fact that John can start all of that, and he can have different problems, like, because of his Earthling heritage, maybe he has a thing where, he ages normally, or his powers don't quite reach the same levels, or different things you can go with. For, like, a job, I always quite imagined I wouldn't want him to do the reporter thing like his parents. I actually always really liked the idea of John Kent being like Jor-El and becoming a scientist.
That's a cool idea.
And like becoming like even if he didn't have a secret identity, he'd just become the Superman who was also like curing diseases on. Because once you start talking about future DC, you don't have to worry about keeping it the same as our world like they normally do in the continuity. So you can just have him cure diseases and cure world hunger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean it's again there's the two different versions of the visions of the future that I always find really interesting between Superman and Batman, where our version of the future for Superman is the Legion of Superheroes, where Earth's a utopia and but there's still problems in the universe and superheroes are uniting to go deal with those, and using Earth kind of as a home base. And then you have the Batman vision of the future, which is Batman Beyond, where all of it was for nothing and Gotham's probably even worse off now.
Which is so fucked.
Right? Like that is like the epitome of those two characters. And so I like the idea that you could probably maybe do a bit of both. You can have, John being the Superboy or Superman alongside Damian's Batman. And then when Damian gets too old to be Batman, he brings in Terry McGinnis, and John and Terry kind of work together as in a similar way to what Damian's working with him on, and you have like a Terry McGinnis who kind of looks up to a John Kent kind of thing. That's a Morrisonism where he added Batman Beyond into continuity. He just nixed Bruce Wayne and made it Damian instead. And I always thought that was a really cool idea that absolutely no one besides David Finch ran with.
Mm-hmm. It's what I would go for the status quo in my thing. And I mean, like, what as maybe like a close of like the future of everything, I can't think of anything better as like, if you want to take John and Damian as like, these are two characters who will be stronger than their fathers, but also their problems will be greater as a result. There's no better idea for the second Superman to have a better Metropolis and the second Batman to have a worse Gotham. Right.
And I find that kind of interesting and to be a cool idea. And so, I don't know, it's just interesting to think about in that regard. But I do think we need to wrap up. What are we going to talk about next time? Oh, boy. I try not to do this, and technically it's not the same thing, because fuck it, I'm not going to justify my decisions to you people. Let's talk about Damian Wayne.
Oh.
We'll make this a Super Sons week, because we've talked about Damian a lot, but we've talked around him. We haven't talked specifically about Damian in this episode. So I think that'll be an interesting little pair for this discussion,
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. All right, everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm a fuckboy geek for fun.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.